The machinery and mirage of Indian democracy, as the largest populous country of the world, India is not a democracy in the pristine textbook sense. It is a noisy democracy, a chaotic democracy, and at times a backsliding democracy. On the face of its institutional architecture, India is not merely a democracy. It is a democratic type. Anyway, in theory at least, it is not an autocratic system. First, the constitutional framework. The Constitution of India, on the face of it, is a good document drafted with immense foresight, which establishes a sovereign and democratic republic. It guarantees its citizens justice, social, economic, and political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of status and opportunity, and promotes fraternity. The sheer ambition of this preamble for a nation emerging from colonial rule and staggering poverty was itself a radical act of democratic faith. Second, the electoral behemoth. Your observation is correct. Elections are held with unerring regularity. This is not a minor feat. The Election Commission of India operates with formidable autonomy, orchestrating what is arguably the largest and most complex logistical exercise in human history. From the snow-clad Himalayas to the remote islands of the Andaman Sea, polling stations are set up to ensure that every eligible citizen, numbering nearly 1 billion, has the opportunity to vote. The peaceful transfer of power through numerous changes in government at the national and state levels has become a mundane reality, not a miraculous event. This ingrained habit of accepting electoral verdicts is the bedrock of its democratic legitimacy. Third, the vibrant and vociferous public sphere. India boasts a free and fiercely independent press, one of the most vibrant in the world. Newspapers, television channels, and digital media platforms engage in relentless debate, criticism, and investigation. Furthermore, Indian civil society is exceptionally active. From grassroots movements for environmental justice and land rights to NGOs focusing on public accountability and legal aid, there is a constant churn of civic engagement that holds power to account. The judiciary, though often overburdened, has a history of judicial activism, using instruments like public interest litigation, PIL, to champion the rights of the marginalized. The potent antithesis, the erosion of ethos and the democratic deficit, however, your feeling that democratic ethos is often honored in the breach is also substantiated by significant and worrying evidence. The machinery may be functioning, but the spirit is often under siege. First, the challenge of illiberalism. A democracy is more than just elections. It is about the protection of minority rights, freedom of expression, and the rule of law. Here, India faces severe strains. There is a growing majoritarian impulse, where the cultural and religious identity of the majority is often conflated with national identity. This has led to laws and social policies that disproportionately affect religious minorities, particularly Muslims, creating a sense of alienation and fear. The use of sedition laws and anti-terror legislation to silence dissenters, activists, and journalists creates a chilling effect on free speech. Second, institutional erosion. The independent institutions designed as pillars of democracy are showing signs of wear and political pressure. The perceived weakening of the Election Commission's authority, the use of investigative agencies against political opponents, and the executive's influence over appointments to the higher judiciary have raised questions about the system of checks and balances. When institutions are seen as partisan, the trust that underpins democracy begins to fray. Third, the tyranny of inequality. This is perhaps the most critical point regarding the goodness of its own people. Can a nation be truly democratic when economic and social inequality is so vast? The promise of one person, one vote is profoundly undermined by the reality where a billionaire's influence can dwarf the voice of millions. While India has seen remarkable economic growth and a reduction in absolute poverty, the benefits have been distributed with extreme unevenness. Caste, the ancient and enduring hierarchy of Indian society, continues to dictate life chances in brutal ways. Violence against Dalits, formerly untouchables, and tribal communities persists. For these citizens, the economic fruits of the democratic behemoth remain a distant, often unattainable mirage. Their political equality at the ballot box does not translate into social or economic equality. The synthesis. A battlefield, not a graveyard of democracy, so, is India truly democratic? The most accurate answer is that Indian democracy is a perpetual and intense battlefield. It is not a settled, polished, and stable democracy like those in some Western nations. It is a raucous, messy, and often violent struggle between its democratic ideals and its anti-democratic realities. The same day that a court delivers a landmark judgment protecting human rights, a mob may commit violence with impunity. The same election that sees massive voter turnout may also be plagued by vitriolic, divisive campaign rhetoric. For its own people, this means democracy is a tangible, albeit flawed, instrument of empowerment. It is the tool used by marginalized groups to secure rights, demand welfare schemes, and challenge entrenched power structures. The very act of voting is an assertion of dignity for millions who are denied it in every other sphere of life. They may not be enjoying all the economic fruits, but the democratic framework provides the space to fight for them. The alternative, an authoritarian system, would almost certainly exacerbate their dispossession. For its neighborhood, India's continued existence as a functioning, if flawed, democracy is of paramount importance. In a region plagued by military dictatorships, unstable governments, and authoritarian regimes, India stands as a testament to the possibility of pluralism and self-governance in a developing post-colonial context. Its stability, however messy, provides a ballast for the region. A democratic India is inherently less belligerent and more predictable than a non-democratic one would be, as its government is ultimately accountable to a diverse electorate with varied interests. The benefits are not always direct or immediately visible, but the model itself, of a billion people governing themselves, is a powerful, silent argument against tyranny. India is not a democracy in the pristine textbook sense. It is a noisy democracy, a chaotic democracy, and at times a backsliding democracy. But it is not an autocracy. The election schedule is sacred, the press, though pressured, is not entirely muzzled, and the courts, though slow, are not wholly captured. The people of India, in their immense wisdom and with their myriad frustrations, continue to engage with the state through their vote, their protests, and their lawsuits. Therefore, to dismiss India as not truly a democratic country is to overlook the monumental achievement of its continued democratic existence against staggering odds. Conversely, to whitewash its very real deficits is to be blind to the corrosion threatening its foundations. India is a democracy that is perpetually under construction and at times under repair. It is a testament to the resilience of the democratic idea, even when its practice is imperfect and fraught. The battle for its soul, between its constitutional promise and its societal pressures, is the defining story of the nation, and its outcome will resonate far beyond its own borders. India's present-day rulers are concerned about population growth of Hindu community and Muslim community. This fixating on population growth actually undermines democracy. In the heated political theater of the world's largest democracy, a persistent and potent narrative has taken hold. The differential population growth rate between the Hindu majority and the Muslim minority. This statistical gap has been elevated from a demographic footnote to a central ethnic and ethical issue. Yet a clear-eyed examination reveals that this focus is not merely a distraction, but a fundamental corrosion of democratic principles, a misreading of social science, and a strategic gambit with perilous long-term costs. The erosion of democratic ideals at its heart. Democracy is founded on the compact of equal citizenship. The state's duty is to remain neutral towards the faith or ethnicity of its people, guaranteeing rights that are inherent to the individual, not contingent on their community's size. The current discourse, however, inverts this logic. By obsessing over the growth rate of a religious bloc, it recasts citizens as mere demographic data points. This is a profoundly illiberal approach, treating individuals not as rights-bearing individuals, but as agents of a collective identity. Furthermore, a robust democracy is measured by its protection of minority rights against the potential tyranny of the majority. The anxiety over a minority's population growth is, in essence, majoritarian insecurity, a fear that political or cultural dominance could be diluted. This mindset undermines the pluralistic fabric essential for a diverse nation to thrive. Ethically, this fixation serves as a potent tool for scapegoating. It diverts public attention from universal challenges, economic stagnation, healthcare, corruption, by shifting the blame for complex problems onto a vulnerable segment of the population. It also represents a violation of bodily autonomy, where the deeply personal matter of family planning becomes a subject of state scrutiny and public debate, echoing darker historical precedents of state-controlled demography. The inflammatory rhetoric of population bombs and demographic jihad does more than just debate policy. It dehumanizes an entire community, painting them as a fifth column and risking the incitement of violence, effectively relegating them to second-class status. A misunderstood demographic reality. The political narrative surrounding Muslim population growth in India often willfully ignores its root causes, which are sociological and economic, not religious or conspiratorial. The phenomenon is perfectly explained by the well-established theory of demographic transition. All societies move from high birth and death rates to low ones, and this shift occurs later for communities that are poorer, less educated, and more marginalized. As a larger proportion of India's Muslim community faces socioeconomic disadvantage, it is simply at a later stage in this universal transition than the Hindu majority, which began the process earlier. Critically, this gap is not a permanent divide. Data from India and across the globe consistently shows that as education, particularly female literacy, economic prosperity and urbanization increase, fertility rates fall and converge with the national average. The significant narrowing of the Hindu-Muslim fertility gap in recent decades is powerful proof of this convergence. Therefore, if the genuine objective is to manage population growth, the solution is not targeted rhetoric but universal empowerment. The most effective and ethical policy levers are investments in education for all, especially girls, poverty alleviation, improved healthcare, and access to family planning services. Singling out one community is neither efficient nor just. The cynical calculus and its national cost, despite the ethical and logical arguments against it, there is a cynical political logic to inflaming demographic fears. In the short term, it can be a devastatingly effective strategy. Polarization, by creating a common enemy, serves to consolidate a majority voting bloc. By stoking existential fears about a changing demographic landscape, political actors can rally their base and overshadow failures in governance, transforming complex census data into a potent electoral weapon. This strategy often dovetails with a majoritarian nationalism, where national identity is increasingly defined in religious terms. From this vantage point, the mere demographic presence of a large minority is framed as a challenge to the nation's cultural and religious purity. While this narrative is powerful for mobilization, it is fundamentally at odds with the civic nationalism enshrined in the Constitution. The short-term dividends of this approach, however, are eclipsed by the profound long-term costs it imposes on the nation. It deepens the fissures of social fragmentation, breeding mutual suspicion and hatred that can last for generations. It tarnishes the country's international reputation as a tolerant, secular democracy. And perhaps most tragically, it consumes the nation's political and administrative energy, diverting focus from the monumental developmental challenges that affect every citizen, regardless of faith. Conclusion. The measure of a mature democracy in the final analysis. To make a minor differential in population growth, a defining national issue is unworthy of a democracy with global aspirations. It is ethically bankrupt, sociologically ignorant, and strategically myopic. A confident and mature nation would view its diversity as a source of strength, not a threat. It would address demographic shifts not through fear-mongering, but through the universal pillars of empowerment, education, and economic development that uplift all citizens. The ultimate measure of a democracy's health is not the demographic size of its majority, but the rights and dignity it guarantees to its smallest minority.